Hey,
Gip, this is the Rock and Roll Rowdies. It's really sad because today we're gonna talk about Meat Loaf. Um, you know how all this came around to the fact of I was the tour manager for Meat Loaf in 1982. We did a European tour and got to know him pretty well. I was with him for over 4 months. And first of all, the story we had, I've got to tell this story. It was in Amsterdam. And he called us up about 6, 7 in the morning, called the management team, and he's like, I've ordered breakfast, come on down, I want to have a chat. So, let's think of a suite in a hotel in Europe. It's still pretty small. So we're in Amsterdam having a day off, and we get down there, and we talk to Meat Loaf, and he's like, well, I know you all like eggs, sausage, bacon, tomatoes, black pudding, and all that stuff. So I've ordered it for 10 people. I'm like, okay, that's fucking great. So an hour later, it's like, Meat, where the fuck's our breakfast? He goes, I'll give him a call. Just as he's going to call, a big bang on the door comes. We open up the door, and you know those trolleys of food that take you to conventions? And they roll in. So they rolled in one full of scrambled eggs, one full of sausages, one full of bacon, and I was throwing his suitcases out of the suite because all these big metal food carts were coming in. They basically gave him 6 carts. Yeah, they gave him one with scrambled eggs, one with 2 eggs over easy, sausage, bacon, black pudding, baked beans, I mean, everything. And he was just laughing his head off. I was like, Mate, I told you got to learn how to speak American in Amsterdam. So anyway, that was one silly story. What's that?
was that just his breakfast?
Yeah, that was just for him. You know, he told us all to wait until he ate. But I mean, not about wasted food, but it was pretty funny. I mean, throwing suitcases out so we can get these trolleys of food in. We probably ordered food for about 100. Instead of 10, I think they gave him for 100 people. So anyway, we go to England, and we were based in one hotel, the hotel in Marble Arch. The one right on the corner, Granny. What the hell was it called?
Cumberland,
But
the
yeah, I think it was the Cumberland Hotel or the Cumberland House or something like that. Huge thing, huge. And what we did, we based ourselves there for 2 weeks. Went up to Birmingham, we came back, we went down to Brighton, we came back. We did 4 sold-out shows at Wembley. And it was just funny things that we were doing. He was a funny guy, he loved talking and bullshitting. So we've had this discussion before about me and my parents, and I've always involved my parents in everything I've done in rock and roll. So down there there for 4 days, and they're getting ready to leave, and Meat Loaf's like, where's your mum and dad gone? I said, oh, well, it's time for them to go home. They've been down here a week. He goes, no, they can stay. So he made them stay, gave them their own hotel room, their
No.
own limo, so they didn't have to come on the tour bus for the sound check and stay there. So they were there for an extra 3 days.
Lovely.
So me being the tour manager of the world, I turned around to him and I was like, well, mate, tomorrow you got to leave by this time because you got a 8 hours drive to Edinburgh, Scotland. And the agency, I think it was William Morris at the time, gave him his own limo, so it was him and Leslie. And he goes, oh, Mrs. Wilkinson, how are you getting up to Hartlepool? They go, oh, we're going on the train. I never even fucking thought of it. And I was like, oh, okay. So at the end of the day, my mum and dad, John and Dot, myself, Leslie and Meat Loaf, jump on a train.
Ah,
So we're in first class, and of course my mum and dad's panicking because they don't have a first class ticket. And it's like, don't worry about it. We'll just upgrade you. So of course we get halfway up there, and this young lad comes in doing the tickets, and he's like, well, you're not supposed to be in first class. And Meat Loaf looks at me and he goes, you got a picture? I went, yeah. So I got a picture. The kid knew it was Meat Loaf, so Meat Loaf signed it, gave it to him, and guy stamped the tickets, and off we go.
bribery.
So
Bribery,
yeah,
shocking.
well, it's what we did. We had all these T-shirts and all of swag back in the day, and that's how we
I'm
got through
shocked.
customs.
I'm
Remember
shocked.
those days? So my mum and dad's telling Meat Loaf about Hartlepool. And Meat Loaf was like, hang on, are you telling me you hung a monkey? And we're like, yeah, we thought it was a French spy. So we laughed and carried on all the way. He was actually playing cards with my mum and dad. You know, whatever, no, it wasn't gin rummy, but it was one of those games that play on the cards. And he had a great time. So all you people who haven't heard of Hartlepool, he's 30 miles south of Newcastle. And I guess in the 1700s, we were always at war with France. And we live on the North Sea, so at the end of the day it was a shipwreck. And this monkey, the size of Mark Embry, comes flying across. And all the locals, picked up this fucking monkey. And you can imagine back in those days, we're like, what are you doing in the building? And the monkey does its thing, and it was like, bleh, bleh, bleh. So they actually put this monkey in jail. And next day they brought it out. I guess it was in one of those little red tunics or something. You know, it was one of those monkeys, I think, that used to dance on the piano. So they took it to court next day, and they found it guilty of being a French spy, and they hung it. And that is the story of the Hartlepool hanging the monkey. So
But they
as I said,
say
Meat Loaf was,
they say he got around a bit with the ladies before they hung him. So there's still he has descendants in the town. Most of them moved over to Wagga.
thank you very much, mate.
He was a well-hung monkey.
He was well hung. Hey, very good. He was a well
Yeah,
both ways.
there you go. So, you know, Meat Loaf really got into the whole thing, and the guy was so generous. He was like, my mum and dad were getting off the train, and he's like, so you coming to Edinburgh? And they're like, no, we don't have any tickets. Well, back in the days, especially in the 70s and the 80s, you know, we had 50 comps every gig, and those 50 comps were for the band's family, the friends, the record label, the roadie, whatever. And Meat Loaf goes, well, there's 50 tickets. We don't know anybody in Edinburgh, so take them. And I'm looking at my mum and dad, and we're like, we'd call you. So they rented a bus, and I had 50 Wagga Wilkies arrived at the gig in Edinburgh. I was like, oh my fucking God, here we go. So it was brilliant because after the gig, what did Meat Loaf do? He took my mum and dad and 50 people down to the bar, gave the barman his credit card, and said, this is all on me, whatever they want. And it was classic. I mean, I've had emails, texts coming in from my brothers and sisters. Oh, remember that night in Scotland? Remember this? So my other brother emailed me, and he didn't go to Scotland, and he went to Birmingham. We had 2 more shows at the end of the tour, and Meat Loaf paid for his room and let him stay in the hotel. You know, I mean, I was like, really? Yeah. You know, so Meat Loaf got involved with Hartlepool in 1982. End of conversation. All of these other myths and everything else that's going on there. And I have seen this interview we did in 2003 about his Hartlepool Football Club. And I think he may have forgotten because it was 82. So it was 20 years earlier. You know, but he was on a radio show, and they asked him what is he like, Man United? Is he like Liverpool? He goes, no, I like Hartlepool United. You know, and explained all of that. But that's where it all came from, because there's all these, everybody in Hartlepool thinks he was going to buy a big house up there. Some people thought he was going to buy Hartlepool United. And then after a while, he just fell off the oceans, and he just fell off the earth and everything else. You know, nobody ever heard from him. But I did see him, oh man, it was 82, I would say early 90s in New York. Just bumped into him. And he didn't even recognize me, so I explained who I was. And he was like, oh, the guy from Hartlepool, how's your mum and dad doing? So he totally remembered that situation, you know. And the only person left is his first wife, Leslie, you know. I mean, Leslie was on the train journey with us, you know. So it was all good stuff. I mean, Meat Loaf was just a very generous guy. He was absolutely brilliant. He did a great show. He kicked me. He told me never to go on his stage again because part of the show was we'd end up with about 20 guitar players on stage, and I was one of them. So we'd come behind the curtain with a guitar. We weren't plugged in, but we looked like we're playing. I mean, I can't, you know. So here I was, the tour manager, tour accountant in my suit. So after 3 gigs at Wembley, Meat Loaf goes, Wilkie, don't come on my stage looking like an accountant again. So at the last gig we did in Wembley, I was like, come on, mate, let me on stage. He goes, no, you look like a fucking tour accountant. I said, that's what I am. But he was good. He had a good time. Lots of fun.
Didn't Hartlepool United honour him with a badge on their shirt or something when they played yesterday? Is that right? Did I hear that?
Yeah,
Right?
there's a whole the the program that was on the T-shirts, and they played his music in half time, and I
Brilliant.
think 8,000 people were singing along with Meat Loaf in
Fantastic.
Hartlepool. Now the other thing is Mal Craggs, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, in the tall ships in
He's suffering from a bad case
2010,
of heel lag,
shoulder lag. He's got
deal
one
lag.
shoulder over easy.
Heel is 8 minutes behind the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, it looks like he's probably going to have an operation. That's what he's saying in 3 months' time. So I was in England doing something with my freight business, and Hartlepool were going to put on a show somewhere in August 2010, and all the tall ships went up to Hartlepool. I cannot remember the woman's name, but we got in touch with the corporation. Mal and I went up there, and I knew exactly what it's going to cost. I spoke to Alan Kovac, so I knew what the agency wanted. And the production was going to cost more than what Meat Loaf was going to charge because there was about 1 million people that turned up to Hartlepool. So this was their farewell gig. You know, all the people that came in, the tourists, to see the tall ships and enjoy themselves. And I don't blame them. You know, the council and anywhere, the jaws just dropped. And I was like, reality is, if you want to put on 1 million people, you can't have everybody going to the football club.
Well, I had an encounter with Meat Loaf
All right.
1988, and this was involved councils and stuff. I'd just come back from the States, and we've got this leisure centre here in Torbay, and it's pretty good size, about 3,000 capacity. So I started working on getting a gig there and getting it sorted out so I could try and bring some touring bands to Torbay, Torbania.
So
Um, and yeah, we
you
got Meat Loaf
have to
to
get
come
a
out.
visa for that, don't you? You have to have a special visa.
Yeah. So March to 1988 it was. So it was after you were touring with the Wilco, but he came down. We've got the stage in, the PA and everything, organised the crew and all that, and he was great. I mean, what a fucking show! What a performer!
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the guy came on stage in a straight jacket, and like started and it was really convincing. I mean, I know it's staged, but it was really convincing. And he was
Uh-huh.
pouring sweat, his veins are bloody sticking out, and
Right, right.
the guy gave 1,000,000% to his performance. So it's like
Uh-huh.
what a legend, what a fucking legend at the end of the day.
I've always been a Meat Loaf fan because of that theatrical stuff, and
Yeah, I mean,
to
I'm
be
not.
there.
I'm a fan because I respect how good he was.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
I mean, at first I was like, I was a bit leery of doing the gig because I was in New York, and it was the '80s. I had a name out there. I was just finishing off with the Allman Brothers, and I was like, you can't sell a ticket in America. I mean, what kind of a tour is this going to be? So I called my old buddy there, Barry Dickens, who was the promoter. And I was like, Barry, Wilco, I'm thinking of doing a Meat Loaf tour. He's like, oh, great, get your ass over here. And I'm going, well, how's it going? He goes, it's sold out. Every gig, 20,000 people. I'm like, I'll be there on
yeah.
the next flight. And I was really surprised because he did millions and millions in the
I guess
box
America
office.
turned their back on him because he ended up living over here pretty much, didn't he? In the
Yeah,
late
yeah,
80s, 90s, doing the Spice Girls movies and shit like that.
yeah. But his concessions. I mean, the T-shirts. I mean, every night we were running out of T-shirts and stuff. It was mental. It was absolutely. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Yeah. Well, I've got a plaque. It's in my wardrobe somewhere. Um, what I got from Barry Dickens' company, saying thank you very much, Wilko, for helping sell over $1 million worth of tickets.
Brilliant.
So I'll have to get that. I'll have to get that out and take a
Dig it
picture.
out, man. Let's get it on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Did
forgot
he
to do that one, Granny.
did he ever get called up by the food companies to do like meatloaf promotions? It was seemed
Oh, Granny.
corny but obvious.
Wow, that's a fucking low blow.
No, no, listen.
Wilco would have a plaque then, like I helped sell 1 million slices of meatloaf. It'd be a good poster.
Well, you hit the nail on the head because after the third gig, the band and crew turned on and went, Wilco, if we see another fucking meatloaf dinner, and even Meatloaf was like, we've had it with this shit. Enough.
Yeah.
And everybody's
Yeah.
going, oh, wouldn't it be nice
Meatloaf.
to have a meatloaf? And he's like, no, we just had one yesterday and the day before. Can we have some fish and chips, please?
That was
Do you get anything else?
No, he actually did. He asked for fish and chips. He goes, go down to Chippy and get me some mushy peas. But he really, and I've got to say this about that to the Hartlepool people. I mean, you've all read about it, and this is from the horse's mouth. I mean, he really loved Hartlepool, but he loved my mum and dad. I mean, he wouldn't let him out of his sight. I said, I want to get two legs over easy. Are you going to leave or what? And they go, no, I'm hanging up with Meatloaf. But he did that with all my family, my brothers, my sisters. After the gigs, he would be hanging out, drinking with them, talking about stuff.
Didn't he want to buy a house out there or something?
What's that?
Didn't he want to buy a house out there in Hartlepool?
Yeah, they said there wasn't a house big enough for him financially. He was looking for $1 million house, but I think after all of that, it was just speculation after speculation. I mean, as I said, I saw him in between 90 and 95, and he didn't even recognize. He had to go back and think of like, oh, who's this guy, And as soon as I mentioned Hartlepool, he remembered the monkey hanging stuff. But I saw this. I saw this tape. He was on Sky's Sports something, and it was in 2003. So he was mentioning Hartlepool that he looked at a book or something, and he just said, "Oh, Hartlepool sounds good." And then when he heard about the monkey hanging, he goes, "Oh, this is perfect." So that's how he chose Hartlepool. But he originally got told by John Wilkinson and Dorothy Wilkinson, my parents, on a train journey in 1982, going up to Edinburgh. My parents got off in Hartlepool. In those days, the train went right through Hartlepool, and they came 2 days later to Scotland with 50 relatives. God
Brilliant.
bless you, Meatloaf. Rest in peace. Had a perfect, brilliant time with you.
Brilliant. Yeah. Rest in peace, Meatloaf.
No, I've just sent Mark. I've just sent you a copy of the cover of Wilco's itinerary from that tour while we were
Okay.
talking.
All right.
Anybody know his real name?
A day.
Not even
His
him.
last name,
Yeah, Michael
a day.
Michael
Michael,
Lee Ade.
yeah.